knowing that the university environment is one of the most complex environments of speculation, conjecture, and interpretation, with a lot of data and not so much wisdom, and surely not so much real knowledge about higher things. And so there's a need to have a good integration of the material and the spiritual to be able to access the spiritual, or to be able to deal with various fields of activity so that the spiritual can come through. So as we are honoring one of our little spiritual warriors in this way. And then just half an hour ago, we were having a chance to engage in another expression of community. In Sanskrit we say sambandha, or relationship. That it is quite artificial to try to know God without trying to connect with the God people, or without trying to practice and apply philosophy and theory. We can read something, we can engage in all kinds of techniques, we can engage in all kinds of yagnas, mantras, etc. All types of austerities. We can visit many sacred pilgrimage places or tirthas. We can be endowed with many blessings. But where it really shows is when we're in community, then it really shows what we have or what we don't have. Because then it's an atmosphere to practice. It's an atmosphere where one has a chance to take inventory, to see better how much they do know, how much they've internalized, how much they can live what they are learning, how much their life has become their message. And so one of the significant aspects of spiritual acceleration is constantly being able to honor the God within each person. We say, Sarvachaham Sani Kristoma Taksviti Agyanamapoanam Cham. Vedichasvamham Vedayo Varanti Kriya Veda Veda Eva Charam. There's indwelling presence of the Lord within every person. And so we can't really honor that until we're in association with people to see how much we can really be able to be consistent and such. But your energy, the conception is mostly egocentricity. People want to honor themselves, care for themselves. Their own sovereignty is practically everything. And as they deal with other people, it's all about how to enhance their own sovereignty. They see people as an extension of ways that they can engage in their own gratification. So they make their circles based on how they can be stimulated in certain ways based on their idea. When it comes to spirituality, it's not about anyone's idea, but it's about the service to the Godhead. It's about trying to come in more in touch with that already is in place, because the spiritual reality, not something that is a part of someone's imagination, not something that we create, not something that we try to interpolate. It's something that we can experience as we receive the blessings from the greater charges. And so as we were having a chance today, I think today was this week was Achuta's birthday and Loka Dasi's birthday. And we're also welcoming Loka Dasi coming back to America. It's a job since there are so many places around the world. And so I also want to offer my appreciation before I share with you a verse from Bhagavad Gita. I want to share my appreciation for so many of you, how you are engaged in your selfless activities, in terms of how you are absorbed in the spiritual process while not separating that from your secular or material life, in the sense that you're using your material life to be able to find more ways to enhance conscious raising. We want to thank those devotees like Madhavacharya and Kunti, and how they keep sacrificing year after year and making the facilities available so that the Institute goes on. I want to thank devotees like Lita and Nisha. We first started talking about alternative environments. We started talking about community and rural life, where we can be able to do more things in terms of a more realistic environment to construct our own buildings and try to grow our own food and engage in alternative health care and other things. That they step forward so much, as just Loka Dasi did. And as we know that the community is growing practically every month, having more and more letters of people from different communities around the world who want to come to associate with what they hear is going on in Gita Nagari. So already we have quite a spiritual United Nations. That as you visit the community now, you see people from many different cultures and different ethnic backgrounds. And that is beauty, that is spiritual. When the spiritual nucleus is strong, then it manifests itself by having a great sense of unity with diversity. Not just conformity, but real sense of diversity. But at the same time, the outstanding factor is unity. We put the Krishna factor there, then we have a strong focus to have a great sense of unity. This time when I came back from visiting so many different countries, Sweden, Switzerland, France, Austria, Germany, Italy, Denmark, and England, and many of the African countries. And then when I came back to visit here and visit Gita Nagari, I was appreciating more and more the importance of having environments where you can constantly take inventory and see how to help each other while individual acceleration goes on. It's very important in this day and time. Also, we want to thank Loka Dasi, how she's helped facilitate the regional secretary and president there at Gita Nagari, as pretty much they have opened the house up to being able to receive devotees. Almost every day I'm there, I see someone coming, for counseling. It becomes like a safe house, because it takes a transition also. When you come in, you live in the cities all your life, all of a sudden you're living in a very peaceful, sattvic environment where you don't see bulletin boards, you don't hear so many cars squeaking, you don't hear horns, you don't hear passionate music, and your basic environment is the deities. It's 50 peacocks and so many cows and sheep and whatnot. It sometimes it's a little, it takes adjustment for many people, because they're used to so much other type of stimulation. So to help that adjustment, and then there's the nice meetings that go on in the community buildings and the Stagoses, and of course a couple of houses. If it gets too intense for you, you run into the houses and you engage in some discourse and some bonding, etc. Or you engage in one of my favorite pastimes. You run for the ice cream and for the pizzas. so like Lotus Dasi's mercy, the facility is being arranged like that. It's always astounding to me, because if you think about it, the two nicest houses in the whole property are houses that devotees who own them never even live in them. You can't be more selfless than that. To go out of your way to purchase a nice, gorgeous house, and you never even live in it. Just make it available for others. So we want to thank all of you in that spirit. Especially we welcome Loka back to America, and we wish her well in her international activities. As I was mentioning to several of you, I guess 2 weeks ago, that we want all to gear up more, preparing ourselves for more international projects. So many opportunities are there, and it's just a matter of sort of tuning in, refining some of the things that we're doing. A lot of it will be constantly in conflict resolution and helping with community development, marital counseling also as well. So we want, and we'll just say the fact, and I keep noticing when I was in Argentina, Mexico, and even recently, that some of the letters that's coming in for people aspiring as devotees, there's so many people who are connected either with counseling or in the health professions. So it just constantly sends a sign to me, this is an area that we want to make more of our international contribution, as we do all the other projects, but we want to focus in these particular areas. So I want to share with you briefly a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 72. And this particular theme that I want to tune into emphasizes some issues about false ego. And we're going to be discussing that in some of the next couple of classes that I give. And one of the reasons is because one of the most difficult areas for advancement is removing or eradicating the false ego. See, whether one is a Christian or Muslim, whether one is a Buddhist, whether one is involved in various types of religious activities or a Vaishnava line, that it's a transition to stop gambling and illicit affairs and improper eating and intoxication, to stop lying and to stop adultery and fornication. It's like we have in the Bible, we have the 10 Commandments, and we have, we have our 10 offenses to be avoided, and go from one tradition to another. But that's all the externals. That's the platform that helps you to be ethical, moral. That's the platform that allows you to be recognized beyond just the basic mundane platform of physicality and literally animal consciousness. And so those things are very healthy and are needed, but that's just only a fundamental. But then beyond that is dealing with the subtle stuff. And that's where community becomes very important, because as you interact, you have constant chance to look deeper and deeper and deeper at yourself. Bhagavad Gita explains also, is it Bhumi apo nalo vaya kama buddha evacha aham prahiti bina prakriti ashtara, that the whole material world is literally made a manifestation of Krishna's separated energies. There are higher energies. There's the higher nature and so many higher schemes of reality. But they have their access as we break through the lower. Bhagavad Gita explains that each of the elements is literally 10 times thicker than the previous. So that means as we go from the earth, water, fire, air, as we go on and on, we get more and more subtle, but more intense, as one tries to penetrate throughout the material universes, galaxies, and even the material body, the material consciousness. So that means it takes a little more work as you start getting more with the subtler stuff that's actually thicker. And of all of the areas of separated energy, the thickest is the false ego, is the ahankara. And so many people, they start dealing with some of the basic things, and they come, you could have difficulty even with that. They deal with some of the basic things, and then as they get to the more subtle, they get stuck, or they touch and they bounce back. There's so many people who are on the spiritual path who never go beyond the false ego. And therefore they only can access a certain level of God consciousness. Because that false ego is still part of the Mahatapa, it's still part of the imprisonment. It still causes one not to be able to really enjoy and experience their highest manifestation. And the false ego has so much to do with misidentification. False ego has so much to do with selfishness. It has so much to do for harmony with my stuff. What I desire, what I want, what I feel that I should experience. And so, in its essence, false ego is unequivocally, categorically, the most difficult problem for any spiritual seeker. And to the degree that it is transcended, is to the degree of how one has really become immortal, a spiritual, eternal spiritual being. To the degree that one has become cognizant or is in awareness of their divine and original nature. It is so difficult that even most spiritualists do not break through such. If they did, then there would not be so much falling. Doesn't matter what tradition it is. You'll find, as you look close, you'll find there are more deviants than those who genuinely honor their theology, even amongst leadership. It is not that they do not know. It is not that they do not seemingly understand. But it's a matter of how much they have become, how much they have broken through those particular barriers. And so it is such a serious issue, and I've been reflecting on it very much lately. This is, I've written this series, the Beggar series. I'm contemplating writing a Beggar 3, dealing only with the issue of false ego. Because there are so many subtleties that accompanies false ego. And there are so many people who are not fully making the mark, who become stagnant, who begin to backslide, who are not experiencing higher because of that. And I'll also be writing this for self-purification. As a devotee constantly wants to grow, to advance, and to be able to become a better servant. And we become better servants to the degree that we are not caught up in serving the illusion, or to the degree that we are not distracted by the gross, central, or subtle attachments. And so I want to read this and share a few things with you as we open a chapter about discussing these kind of things. Because we want to have leaders. A spiritual teacher, a spiritual master who is just interested in followers, disciples, students is bogus. The duty of a spiritual teacher is to give the highest of what they have. If you don't have high, you can't give much. Or if you just want to be high and you keep others low, then that is simply oppression. It's all a part of material nature. It has little to do with transcendence. So as we understand that we all have great treasures waiting for us, as we understand that we do not have to experience death, disease, old age, or any type of confusion, because so much confusion is based on the ambiguity of not experiencing. And so therefore, as there's lack of experience, then there is fear, there's manipulation, and there is exploitation. They can either be consciously or unconsciously. But as we experience more divinity, then we become that, and we radiate, and we share that, and we enthuse others with that wherever we are and whatever the interactions are. We don't turn on our spiritual self and turn on our material self, but we are spiritual. Whatever we're doing, we find a way how to spiritualize it. Because one becomes a carrier of the higher bhakti. So I want to read this. Vijaha kamaya savam purmascharita nishpraha mirmano nihakara satsamtem ahigachati. Now that is Sanskrit. The English translation is, a person who has given up all desires, not some, all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship, and is devoid of false ego. He or she can alone attain real peace. Let me read purport by Srila Prabhupada. To become desireless means not to desire anything for sense gratification. In other words, desire for becoming Krishna conscious is actually desirelessness. To understand one's actual position as eternal servitor of Krishna or God, without falsely claiming this material body. To be oneself and without falsely claiming proprietorship over anything in this world is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. One who is situated in this perfect stage knows that because Krishna is the proprietor of everything, or you can put in there Allah, Jehovah, Yahweh, So we say Krishna, we are having very confidential understanding about the Godhead, very specific, and so therefore we access the name of the Lord based on this highest transmission of appellation. Arjuna did not want to fight for his own sense satisfaction. But when he became fully Krishna conscious, he fought because Krishna wanted him to fight. For himself, there was no desire to fight. But for Krishna, the same Arjuna fought to his best ability. Real desirelessness is the desire for the satisfaction of the Lord, not an artificial attempt to abolish desires. The living entity cannot be desireless or sinless, or senseless. He can definitely be sinless. But he does not have to change the quality of the desires. A mature desireless person certainly knows that everything belongs to Krishna. Ishavasha idam sarvam. And therefore he does not falsely claim proprietorship over anything. This transcendental knowledge is based on self-realization, namely knowing perfectly well that every living entity is an eternal part and parcel of Krishna in spiritual identity, and that the eternal position of the living entity is therefore never on the level of God or greater than him. This understanding of Krishna consciousness is a basic principle of real spiritual life. So I'd like to talk about for the next few minutes is the importance of losing oneself to gain oneself. The importance of losing oneself to gain oneself. Or now it's being discussed in management and business circles to do things with the end in mind. We can offer this as the thesis of today's presentation. Now, this conception of losing oneself, Baba explained, we do not become desireless. We do not become free of identity. But it's a matter of reclaiming our actual, genuine identity. But to claim our real identity, we have to lose our false identity. It is the false identifications we keep holding on to that obfuscates or minimizes and distracts from claiming our real identity. Now, it's not such an unusual notion because we do this about our own stuff, but we have difficulty doing it for the Lord. Just as if one is a musician, a sports, let's give an example. Say if you are a musician, if you are just caught up in thinking about what people are thinking about you, how you look, if you are caught up in thinking about every single note, every single beat, you'll simply be ridiculous. You will not perform properly and you'll interfere with others. But as you give up your identity and you, for lack of a better word, you identify or you merge with the music as a whole and the group as a whole, then you perform. And as you absorb in that, later you may come back to your own self-centered identity. But to properly perform, if you're thinking about each note, you'll forget. You become confused. You'll cause a problem for yourself and also for others. Similar in sports. So the best athletes, they already have envisioned the goal of jumping this high, of running this fast, of accomplishing this, of knocking this person down, of doing this. They've already visualized the end in mind. And they have absorbed themselves in the achievement of that. And not just thinking about the individual specific things each moment. That's all a part of just the temporary, or all a part of the piecemeal aspect. And so an athlete, one runs long distance. One absorbs himself in the goal and in the experience. But if one is thinking about the pain here, the cramp here, one is thinking about this, one is thinking about, no, it would be distracting. And such a person would simply be slowed down in the effort. And so we see people doing this. And we often do this ourselves. But how much do we do it when it comes to the spirituality? A good chess player, not just absorbed in only the immediate single movement, but is visualizing all different plays, visualizing the success, merges himself into that experience, lose their identity in order to gain ultimately the victory of a higher identity. An artist, doesn't matter. You take a vocalist. So if the vocalist is just thinking about each single stanza, each single word, each single note, it'll be a farce. If she's even thinking about what people are thinking about me, how I'm moving my mouth, my nose, my hands, it'll be a problem. Even if she's thinking about who, or he's thinking about who's out there in the front row, who's in the back, it'll be a problem. But one gives up their identity and emerges into the act of the offering of the music. And therefore the nervousness or the confusion doesn't become so prominent. And so in our spiritual acceleration, it is so significant that the little details of being a man, being a woman, being an American, being an Indian, being an African, being a lawyer, being a doctor, being an engineer, being a child, being an adult, that all of those things, we have to merge away from that. We have to give up some of that stuff in order to develop a sense of who we really are. Not as a denial, but we have to see all of that is part of something much greater. And so as that musician is engaging in becoming that, he's not just thinking of this particular note, this particular beat only, even though that's reality, it's part of the experience. But he's thinking of the whole picture, of becoming more a part of an offering that he or she has absorbed themselves in. And therefore, they offer something of depth. So these spiritualists may be involved in all types of work, all types of professions, all type of political, economic, other types of considerations. It's all part of there. Even all different types of religiosity. But one has to move higher than that and grasp the deeper picture and grasp a deeper sense of identification, deeper reality. As we do that, then we begin to move away from the false ego. People may see me or address me according to where they know me from. It's John, or it's Johnny Boy, or it's Shambi, or it's Ganesham, or it's Bhakti Tirtha, or it's Swami Krishnapad. But at the end of the day, I must step out of that. People may address me as a spiritual mentor, but at the end of the day, I have to move out of that. People may address you as such and such person who is expert in this profession, or is good in this, or who does this, or does that. But one must lose that to acquire a higher sense of who they are. Otherwise, the ego settles in different ways. And one begins to imbibe so much of that temporary stuff that causes one to have to come back into material universes, material bodies. But as we realize that we are beyond that, we're all eternal residents of the spiritual world. We have eternal relationship in dynamic spiritual association. And there is eternal environment for expressing such. And so we keep that identity in mind. We begin to reflect more and more on how people who have risen above the false identity, what they do, how they do. And we begin to tune in more to such personalities. And we have so many great acharyas. in various traditions, great prophets, rishis. As we identify with them and move outside of our identities, while we simultaneously do what we are in this body with expertise, so we do not have to be so much distracted by it. It means that we don't begin to now act on a physical level based on the higher reality, because we do have these physical bodies, and we do have a certain profession, and we do have a certain gender, and we are in a certain race, and we are in a certain geographical environment. But just as we do have a car, and we do have a house, and we do wear a black dress, and we do wear brown pants, yes. And so, that's there, but it's not our identity. We don't take care of it, then of course that is being negligent. But if we embrace or put all of our energy into such, even most of our energy into such, then that is the false ego manifesting in different ways. In Sanskrit, that's what is called nirmana mohan, being void of any false distinctions. And in the Uttara Upanishad, in the first mantra, Ishavasha idam sarvam yatkincha yagatam jagat. Tena tektena bhumtitaha magridha kesha svirana. That there is quota. Everything is ultimately owned by the Lord. Everything is perfectly arranged also by the Lord. Om Puna Arahapuna. However, we can use or misuse based on what is naturally arranged. We can exploit it. We can minimize it. We can be excessive in what we are trying to bring for ourselves, claiming as ours, based on a false conception. Every problem that kicks one in immature energy is directly due to false perceptions. Every sin, every fall down, every stagnation is due to false perceptions. Every acceleration is due to more and more enhancement of clarity of perception. Just yesterday every day I get so many letters now and email. And so yesterday we had a letter of someone who wants to aspire as a disciple. And so the young gentleman was saying, give a little background, he's in university and studying some physics or engineering or something, but was saying how he was trying to live his life and to do things, say things, based on how he feel, I would say, I would do what would be pleasing. So in one sense, this sounds like, hey, this sounds pretty fanatical. Someone is denying their own free expression. Someone is denying their own idiosyncratic tendencies. Someone is minimizing their own nature. In a material sense, this definitely is a sign of codependency, dysfunctionalism, etc. But in a spiritual sense, can be the highest expression, because when you really love someone, or you're trying to love someone, you are constantly thinking, what will be pleasing to my beloved? How would my beloved like to receive this? What would they like to do? How would they interpret this? What can I do with them? What can I do for them? Why? Because deep love is a losing of oneself to gain oneself. It cannot be serious love if one is thinking too much about themselves and others based on what they can get from other people and other environments. But as we lose ourselves in thinking so intensely and genuinely about our beloved, less and less of what is for ourselves becomes important. What is very powerful when there is reciprocation. Yes, people are afraid to love deeply because if they enter into that mood, they are not so sure the other person is going to reciprocate, or they are afraid that they may get exploited, and in most cases they do. So people are a little shy about the degree of how much they lose themselves in such ways. But then as we do not lose ourselves, we cheat ourselves. Because the more we hold on to the temporary identity, the more we cheat ourselves from our higher expressions, our higher pleasures, and our higher chances to have deep sense of union and dedication and appreciation. And so people all over the planet are cheating themselves because they're afraid to really open up whatever the relationships are. Whether it's family, whether it's business, whether it's friendship, whether it's conjugal, people are afraid. Because they're afraid if they come that open, or if they put so much of the other stuff to the side, they're not so sure what is going to meet them. And that imposes a big problem. But we cannot ultimately connect with the Godhead without losing this temporary identity. We can't connect with the highest source of love without becoming like that. And you know, in deep love there is madness. There is just constant meditation, reflection on one's beloved. And a constant desire to honor and to serve. And the more there's opportunities for that, the more one begins to feel their wholeness. Because they're not putting on hold their higher expressions, but they're allowing the higher expressions to come up. So imagine what is happening on the planet when less and less and less people, doesn't matter what part of the world, people are not able to offer their highest expressions. They're not able to do that or to be honored even when they try. So there's all this kind of posturing that goes on. And then we try to engage now in a religious and spiritual commitment. We bring some of the same mentality that we have reinforced and become conditioned by, and it becomes hard to be all for the Lord because we don't know what it means to be all for anything. And so it becomes very, very difficult. So this devotee was writing that I am just thinking what you would say in this situation, what you would do, what you would desire. That he was trying to lose himself in the idea of trying to connect with spiritual mentorship for guidance. It is dangerous, but it is powerful. The most powerful spiritual things are extremely dangerous and extremely potent. This is why many people now do not love deeply, because they have tried and they got hurt. Or they put themselves out there and there was no one to meet them, to catch them. And they start beginning to think that you don't do this. It's not a reality. It is something that is conceptual based on Hollywood. It's something that people do as pretension or as drama. And it really doesn't exist. And so no wonder more and more people are getting physical sicknesses. Because as they shut down so much of their higher nature, then it begins to tune in and it begins to eat away from their physical and psychological existence. So many diseases, so many physical and psychological problems has so much to do with a lack of people being able to lose themselves in the absorption, the explosion of love and selflessness and compassion, which is all ultimately spiritual. Srila Prabhupada, well, before I mention that, I was reading earlier in later sections how Krishna explains, the Prabhupada purports, how a devotee does not become their enemy's enemy. That means, even though one may position themselves in an antagonistic way toward another one, that the person of spiritual or divine consciousness does not honor that adversary as an enemy, even though the person may be about such. Because they are not identifying with anything that's so relative that they're going to get distracted by this enemy and friend, or more serious enemy and less serious enemy. Srila Prabhupada was once on a walk where he was, I think it was in Bombay, and he was having these regular walks, and this one gentleman was accompanying him, who was very argumentative, rude, and actually later harsh. And some devotees were a little bit disturbed about this person. And Prabhupada spoke how he must have done something to this man in a previous life. So even in cases where we may know that we are not in the wrong, or we may be totally bewildered why someone is positioning themselves as our enemy, but as one has lost their sense of material identity, they are not honoring the duality, and even when such is there, they simply use it to access the spirituality. In other words, they keep the love going on. They're thinking, well, it must be my issue, that maybe I did something to this person in a previous life. And therefore, they do not give in to this identity of hostility, an enemy and friend. And therefore, this person is seen as my enemy. Now, I must relate to them. I must deal with them as an enemy. I must now bring myself down to deal with them as an enemy, because after all, they are trying to attack me in a certain way. But one does not. One has lost themselves to something higher. And therefore, they are connected with that desire to such an extent that they're stable and not being engulfed in such ways. I want to just give you one other little story, because I want to spend a little more time with questions. Now we're in the Christmas period. And so there is a lot of reflection on Lord Jesus, just as Easter and other times. And any of these great, great personalities, we can learn so much about them. So much about their own dedication, love. So much about how they have immersed themselves into the bigger picture. How much their life is their message. How much they are doing things with the end in mind. How much they are not getting distracted by the little obstacles that are here and there. How much they are not being distracted by other people's maya or duality. And to what degree they do not play the game of enemies and friends. But they're in love with God, they're in love with life. And therefore they're able to connect with that God quality that is genuinely a part of everyone, but is put on hold in most cases. So I'm going to end with this, and then we'll see what questions that you have. When Jesus was carrying the cross, struggling to prepare for his own crucifixion, and as he moved forward closer to crucifixion, so the Surah Maharaj, he explains this very nicely. He says, and at some point, Judas met eye-to-eye contact with Jesus. And it was overwhelmed. Because as Judas looked in Jesus' eyes, he didn't see somebody who was angry about what had just transpired. He didn't see someone who was vindictive, who was ready to drop the cross on him. He didn't see someone who was cursing with vulgarities. And how can these people do this to me, and especially you, one of my dear students, who I gave so much to? No. But when Judas looked in his eyes, he saw such deep love, deep compassion. He saw one who understood a bigger picture. Because if anything, Judas saw compassion and he saw sorrow. Not Jesus for himself, but he saw gratitude and sorrow reflected on Judas. Because in that expression, he communicated, thank you. Because perhaps it could have taken so much longer for people to have a deeper understanding of something spiritual. Perhaps my mission could have gone almost unnoticed. Perhaps people would have even more difficulty understanding the love of the God who has sent me. But now they will understand that he has so much love that he sends his special agents, even though they're misunderstood and abused, even though their lives are taken. How people will gradually understand what God will do, go to all kinds of arrangements to try to reclaim those who were captured by false identity. Even knowing that most of them still won't change. When he sends his representatives, will abuse and misuse them, but he sends anyway. And then constantly makes arrangements to try to help and to help and to help. And so you, Judas, you have glorified me to the highest because you have put me in a situation where I can show that one must be ready to give all for the Lord. Where I can show to what degree that one must not engage in the temporary identity. Judas, I am an eternal being, and they cannot stop me or stop my Father's mission. As a matter of fact, all they will do now is they will glorify and they will amplify the mission as people will come to worship and to hear about me for the duration of this universe. And so here we see, during this time, that we are to honor such a great servant as Jesus, of how one of the messengers sent by the same Krishna, the same God, according to time, place, and circumstance, shows us the importance of one not thinking just of their own sovereignty, interest, protection, idiosyncratic concerns. Because there was such a sacrifice. And all of the eternally liberated beings, as they come into this world, they are so much absorbed in their real identity. They are not allowing themselves to get distracted by the fragmentations that are constantly existing. Racism, tribalism, political, economic fragmentation, religious fragmentation. It's one of the worst. It may be all around them. They may have to talk about it. They may have to move through it, move next to it, but they do not identify with it. And even when any of that stuff comes their way, any type of negativities, they either see it is something perhaps I have done in a previous life, or something I have done in this life that I was not aware of. honor. Because something is understood by its negative as well as by its positive. So they honor that as an expression to be able to amplify their dedication, their love, and their service to God. Therefore, what we're looking at in conclusion is we're looking at the idea of losing one's temporary identifications. Working and thinking the end in mind, here Jesus is realizing, okay, so the Pharisees and all of these cheating so-called religious protectors, caretakers, who are mainly responsible for sending me to the cross because my life exposes their deviation. That they think they are getting rid of me. But now they have glorified my mission even more. And they have set into motion where that in time immemorable people will be reflecting that the Lord sends messengers. Even when people do not understand, messengers still come and they do the necessary and they leave. They offer, they associate, they take on seemingly a human type of quality. They give us that level of, they're so close to us in that way, and they leave. And so it's a message that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ever arranging for help. But it's hard for the help to come through when there is so much misidentification. When someone is in need, but do not think they're in need, they will not take advantage. When someone is in need, they do not realize how grave the situation is, they will not do what's necessary for the assistance. And so many people minimize the importance of dealing first with the gross things and then eliminating the subtle. So as we examine to what degree have we become immersed, just like the musician in his music or her music, or the chess player, or the sportsman, or the artist. The artist is thinking of each single stroke, and they have trouble. They've already envisioned some particular work, and now they're moving more and more closer toward that achievement. They immerse themselves in that experience. So we want to immerse ourselves more and more of transcendence. That whatever we do, wherever we go, whatever we wear, or none of these identities are we any of those. But what we are is that we are eternal servants of the Lord. And to the degree that we can genuinely embrace that, then we move out of the realms of duality that brings so much of the degradation, frustration, and pain. People are so wounded in so much pain. And allows us to be able to have this kind of reflection at this young disciple, that what I'm thinking, what I am doing, what I am about to experience, I'm thinking, what would you want? How would it be pleasing? Let us be able to have that as we honor sadhus and saints, as we honor the great acharyas, as we think about the Godhead, and even as we do our practical things in our jobs, in our family life, etc. We look at the bigger picture as we imbibe that mood of accomplishment, that it has already happened, and now we're just waiting for just the time element to reveal to others. So this is losing temporary identity and now accepting more greater holistic spiritual paradigm. Hare Krishna. We'll take what questions that you have.
You mean you want us to show you our false identity? Some more of it.
So that's it. I think I'm going to do Beggar 3, just on offerings concerning false identification. Because it is the number one issue that stagnates our spiritual growth. It causes us to get too distracted by secondary things. We put our sudden on hold. It causes us to get disturbed by intoxication, by illicit sex. It causes us to identify with enemies and friends. It causes us not to allow so much of our higher existence to come out into radiance.
Yes, I have.
Yes, please.
Showing you some more. I heard what you said about the young man, and that's very good and all that. And I guess that my comment would be, you know, is our people or those of us who would like to be aspiring or are aspiring, is that the way we're supposed to handle any situation with someone who has more of a commission than we do, you know, as you do, of course. You know, just being the person that I am, you know, I know that that's not possible. What can I say?
Sure.
You know, that I am one who wants to question and I'm a seeker, you know, I'm clarifying, I'm focusing and all that. So I would not come to you that way, perhaps.
Sure.
You know, my way, my style is completely different. And so I'm wondering, you know, that's used as an example. But I also want to see that those of us who are seekers and who question and have questions and are focusing, clarifying, whatever, are also seen in a positive way as well.
Sure. It's definitely very difficult when our experiences have basically been people cheat us or disappoint us. But Shraddha, our faith is so important. Not faith in external things, even people. But our faith in God should be so strong. We're ready to do the spiritual thing, realizing that the Lord then has duty to cover us if we do as He says. If we make an issue of personality worship association, then there's a problem. Or if we have faith, and where the faith is not reciprocal, or the love is not reciprocal, or if we have faith and we're not distinctly seeing qualities of God or qualities of sadhu being represented, then it's blind faith, it's foolishness, it's docile, and one will surely get disappointed. It's just like the most successful business people are those who take the greatest risk, but thought out, meticulous risk. And therefore they become highly successful. The greatest people in any area of life who have become topmost is because they are able, willing, and courageous enough to take such a big risk, which means they may also have a big failure. But they put things in place for the risk and then they go on. And so we must realize that spirituality also involves risk. But we must look to see what are the things that constitute sadhu, what are the things that we are trying to become, that we feel the person can perhaps offer, and then based on such things, and we have, of course, Shastra and we have sadhu, based on those things, then we make that. Now you take the same thing about love. Someone who is always paranoid as they interact in a loving relationship, then they may have healthy reason. And it may be genuine that they really shouldn't give themselves fully. But they will hurt themselves. So they have to line up in such a way that they feel that there's someone who is deserving, who they feel can catch the love that they're going to give, and then they throw it and they get it. You see how hard it is in society. When people are constantly thinking about it, testing the water a little bit, and getting disappointed. But as those who really give up their identity, they're even considered mad people. You look at any high-level saint, they're like mad. Because they're genuinely ready to depend on God whatever is going on. If they have no food, if they have no shelter, if they have no friends, they have no clothes, if they have no notoriety, it doesn't matter. Because they have immersed in something so deeper that is so self-sustaining. So that is not what each person is ready to do, was able to do, without a certain amount of sukriti and a jnana sukriti. In other words, even when we meet and I'm not saying I'm not, because I'm just a evolving person, but even when we meet the pure servants of God, we will not be able to surrender to them fully unless there is a tremendous amount of eradication of evil. Even when we find that person where the marriage or the romance is made in heaven, so to speak, we will not be able to honor it if we're too afraid. We'll miss it. See, what we're dealing with is that life itself deals with very big decisions. And to be a high achiever, one has to think big and act big. Prabhupada would call it shooting the rhinoceros. That one has to think big and act big. And then put things in place, and you go forward. That happens after one has involved themselves in a lot of scrutinization. See, just to jump with a sense of commitment without having done the homework can be very dangerous. But after doing the homework, if you just keep doing the homework, and keep doing the homework, and keep doing the homework, you never become professor. You never become the actor. And at some point you've done homework and then you have to jump in. Do you have questions? See, this is one of the reasons why people also stray away from the deep personal aspect of the relationship, with God. Because then it means more of giving oneself to receive, receive divinity. But as we're dealing with the energies of God or the Shakti, then one doesn't have to give themselves, to that extent.
Sure, Krishna. In cases where someone has actually committed themselves to a religious situation and seemingly the commitment becomes so strong that they fanatically identify with it, like in the case of the wars in Islam, even between different Muslims or in Christianity, and they kind of say that this is a spiritual thing, and they've actually become so committed, so involved that they're willing to die for it, and so forth. So how do we understand that? Do we understand that as just in spiritual immaturity, or is some other kind of false ego in spirituality?
Well, the mullahs would look at that, or the scholars, Islamic scholars, they would say you have to separate acculturation. We have to draw a line on what actually is politics and what is, what is religion. Because we see, the jihads, we see, when we look at Christianity, for instance, or any religious institution, and you see the amount of evils that have been done, under the banner of religiosity, and it makes organized crime, look like Boy Scouts. Where people can testify, and actually call it, divine. So we have to separate that. That is instances where people are using theology, using religion for their own agendas. They haven't really given up ego. But big ego, and they find ways to hide it within religious and spiritual institutions to carry out their own plans. And that causes a lot of people to be fearful. And like I said, I was at a religious conference, last year in Potomac, and we were with a lot of religious scholars. And so as we opened up, we all sort of shared who we were, what tradition we were associated with, and why we had come. And so I kind of, for lack of a better word, I think, from the expressions, I blew the mind of some of the people who were there, as well as my own people. Because my 3 comments was, 1, I am very uncomfortable with any organized religion, even my own. That was my opening address. We were an interfaith gathering, Muslims or Christians, and bishops, etc. I was letting people know, we're all here, but I have a healthy paranoia, what I consider healthy. I said, I'm going to put it on the table. I'm uncomfortable with any organized religious institution, including my own. Even though I've constantly been a leader of organized religion, I said, I have a problem with it. I said, second, I have a problem with interfaith. And I explained because what we normally call interfaith is that we somewhat honor each other's right to exist. Or a little better, if we study each other exegetically, or like sociologically, literarily, etc. Of what those people do and why they do. I said, I'm really not interested in that. I said, but I'm interested in people who have accessed a bona fide religious tradition, have gone deep in that, and they are about deep religious expressions and experiences. I said, I'm interested in associating, interacting with those people. And they almost threw me out. Because basically it was 99% scholars. And the majority of them did not even believe their own theology. As the bishops and others started speaking, it was shocking how they were literally blaspheming their own theology because it was more of a profession. And I felt after that retreat, I felt, I am not going to go back to the next year's meeting. But I felt that I put on the table why I come. And I felt like I didn't get what I came for. And so I thought, I'm out of here. It wasn't that I wanted to just be there because they were Christian people, or I had any intimidation about other religions. But I wanted to be with people who had honored a bona fide tradition and were experiencing a certain amount of freedom of ego, a certain amount of freedom of categorization, develop a certain amount of love, a certain amount of selflessness, and based on that there would be a certain type of things we could share, even though we may talk about it in a different way, but it would be a certain type of experiences based on having access to a level of reality. And because I was I'm the second senior most on our international Hare Krishna board, so I was also like Mr. Hare Krishna, who's saying that, look, I'm uncomfortable, with any institutionalized religion. And I was representing, the Vaishnava and the Hindu orientation. So I'm unhealthy, I feel uncomfortable with what I'm connected with, as well as what you're connected with, if we're going to let it be based on external, or just based on institutions. But it's a problem. And that there's so much tendency that people begin to make the structure the thing of itself. And then what happens, when real saints come through, they can't identify, because it doesn't fit into the structure. Or when people begin to accelerate sense of divinity, they can't identify. They see them as simply anarchists or revolutionists. And what begins to happen, they keep reinforcing people who just involve themselves in honoring the old paradigms of just control, manipulation, and power. And the same people, if Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, if they came again, they would attack them. I think there was a movie like that, right? Jesus came back and one of the disciples was saying, look, I don't know who you are, but you better go back where you came from. Because as he started dealing with the bingo games and exploitation, the things going on, and even sometimes the murders and crimes that go on the banner, of religiosity. What they say, the number of blasphemies and things that go on, people in pseudo, spirituality, they would be very disturbed. And they would first say, look, I didn't say that. Muhammad would say, hold a minute. All this, I didn't say that. Jesus would say, the Buddha would say, and the great Acharya, they would say, hold a minute. Jiva Goswami, they would say, we ourselves had differences of opinion and different ways to discuss different things. But we didn't have enmity. We didn't blaspheme. We didn't lose it. We became deeper in our understanding of the mellows and the ways to serve the Lord, the divine God. Any other questions?
I had a question. Historically, we've been seeing in religious traditions how religion has been used as a tool to control, manipulate the masses, actually exploit and manipulate the masses. So how do we as devotees, aspiring devotees, I mean, firstly, I know Prabhupada is guiding me where I want to go, but still, how do we know that this is not a situation where we're going to be exploited, or the religious teachings are being used, or how to keep them from being used as a means of controlling us for ulterior motives?
We don't. Because subjectivity is always there until one is pure. But the saving grace is the presence of Krishna in the heart. So according to one's actual desire to grow and to accelerate, Krishna will send help, the guidance, and the clearing. Therefore, what's important is for one to work deeper and deeper on trying to be genuine within him or herself. And they will get the necessary help that aligns itself with the need. Otherwise, we should just throw out all the religious things altogether. If somebody is genuine and they're really full and earnest trying to approach the Lord, and they're just getting cheated and cheated and cheated, as if Maya, Satan, or temptation is in control and more dominant, more powerful than divinity, there's no reason for us to honor divinity. We should honor Satan or Maya, because Maya is strong. But if there is genuine posturing to come closer to the Godhead, then it becomes the Lord's duty, as He's declared, as one surrender our voice from accordingly, to bring in and to facilitate, even or in spite of whatever that the obstacles are. The person will still be constantly being called in. Because the duality and the cheating is just par for the course, for material civilization. Like in the case, as I was saying about Jesus or Prabhupada, that even though this man was actually being offensive and rude, but Prabhupada did not play into it. So even though Judas had done, one of the most devastating things in Christian history, or parts of world history, that we never heard later Jesus said, that Judas guy, Paul, Peter, John, you guys be sure to deal with him. There's some satisfaction that you're going to deal with him. He didn't say that at all. Before I'm out, he said, Father, make sure that everybody knows that nobody ever does this again to your son. Deal with him. That wasn't the mood of it. Any last
All right,
question?
right here.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for the discourse. Wonderful. But I think about an issue in the scriptures, Christian scriptures. I think St. Matthew, where the a young lady was found to be unfaithful, and according to the mob, one of the leaders in the mob, under the old law, they were supposed to stone her to death. But there was one person in that great number of people, and he spotted Jesus. He said, "Here, wise man. By our law, we're supposed to stone this woman to death. But what do you think about it?" Jesus said, "Let anyone among you," I think that's the way he expressed it, who has never done anything wrong, never committed a sin, or let him cast the first stone." and that lady was spared because of that. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, there's many things to be said, but one or two things. One, it shows the danger in being self-righteous. How we have to always invoke mercy. Now, it doesn't mean that there's no law. It doesn't mean that when people break spiritual laws, that there's no consequence. The transcendental aspect is that there is chastisement proportionate to the crime and forgiveness after chastisement. In a case where there is so much deviation, then collectively there is need for everyone to address that and not to single out individuals as like scapegoats. So we're dealing with the position of the warning that's there is that everyone has to look a little closer at themselves when there is sin in the environment. We have to see what role we're playing that may enhance it or reinforce it, or what role we're playing that has created an environment that has even come in. It's easy just to, address one person or one issue and let it go in that way. But Jesus was trying to show something on a larger scale. It wasn't that he said, look, she's perfect, she's okay, but she's better than all of you. But he was saying, okay, let's look at ourselves also. Let's address this whole thing from a deeper level. Let's address it with compassion and deal with the deeper issues. Any last question? And this is why I was, just before you say that, this is why when I started off, when I came down, I was thanking all of you for the things that you do, that honor community. Because so much of spiritual acceleration happens as we have to apply it and have to look closer, inventory, or as we share in such ways. But Jesus was giving attention. Hold it. Don't look at this one person. Look at community. Look at the community, what you have created and what you all are. And let's address it. Each person take inventory and look at their own sins and activities that has created this environment of sinfulness. Mike?
When you were speaking about attending the conference in Potomac, and I think you said you were 3 points
Yes.
that you made. Did you finish the 3?
Yeah, the third point was mentioning something positive. The first was negative. First, I was not interested so much. I felt paranoid about any institutionalized religion, including my own. And second, about the interfaith, is that I was interested in not just the anthropological, sociological, literary investigation, why people do stuff, but and the third was positive. But interested in interfaith, where people have used certain tradition or certain teaching, certain connection, Vaishnava, or even something different. But the question is, how much have they really accessed a deeper level of consciousness? I'm interested in interacting with people of deeper spiritual unfoldment and consciousness.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I heard all those points.
Okay. Maybe take one more question and then we'll stop. We have Ms. Allen for you. Well, let me just wrap up. So the essence of this was just a matter of losing oneself to gain oneself. As Baba was saying in the verse, as Krishna was speaking, it's not a matter of becoming desireless. It's not a matter of becoming void of activity. It's not a matter of just renunciation. It's not a matter that we're trying to kill ego. Not at all. It's the opposite. We're trying to bring ego from the dead. We're trying to revitalize real ego, pure ego. And so to the degree that false ego keeps surfacing, there ought to be constant problems, constant issues with a community, a planet, an institution, and with individuals. And we see that it's not such a hard technology to begin to access more, because we constantly keep losing ourselves, part of ourselves. as one becomes very enticed or involved in something. We gave the example of music, of sports, of entertainment, of art, of so many different things, where the individual, cannot be successful by just being so self-conscious or being so much into just only these small, small details. One has to imbibe deeper connection. And so then I gave the little story about Prabhupada and someone who was literally being in an obnoxious mood. They did not honor it. And then I also shared the example of an aspiring disciple who was thinking in this mood. Now, it's perhaps immature, perhaps it's not something so deep yet, but in the mood of thinking how to do things in a way that one's spiritual mentor or one's beloved would be pleased. And so this is ultimately the way that we're supposed to be thinking when it comes to God. How would the Lord want me to do this? How can I offer this? What is the best thing to do about my family, about my job, about my life that would enhance the spiritual situation? And then we make decisions based on that. And by doing this, we've lost it. We've lost so much of the material distinction. And now we're addressing things based on the higher, which is a relationship to our soul. And so we're making the priority and evaluating each thing based on what it really has to do now with God, with say Krishna, and with our eternal situation as spiritual beings. As we begin to do that, through this manaseva, through this meditation reflection, we're moving away. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. And it's not something that is, an imposition, but it's our real reclaiming of our actual heritage. And then last I talked about of the ingredients of the Mahatattva, or the coverings that cover the physical body and cover the material planet, that each is 10 times thicker than the previous one. And the most difficult is the false ego, that is the thickest. So constant, there's a problem. And even doing the other things nicely, that if one doesn't hash out deeper the false ego, then you'll find, even amongst spiritualists, fights in different traditions versus other traditions, or if in the same tradition, you'll find so much difficulty in people being able to honor and respect and get along in more of a synergistic way, because egos will come in. One's own idiosyncratic identification rather than that of God. As we keep bringing it to the honoring of the Godhead, the many decisions become easier to access about what is to be done, and many things we do create so much value for the individual, the institution, as well as for the planet, because now it goes beyond the duality and the relativities. It's not so hard to do the right thing when we remove false ego, but it's very easy to do the wrong thing to the degree that ego keeps surfacing. This confounds the child of divine grace, A.C. Bhakti Tirtha Swami to the Prabhupada ki.